Hey guys, it's the Metal Blade 5, and welcome back to another Metal Blade Fury. With the current state of the gaming scene involving a lot of fighting games, both in terms of games released this year and upcoming games, it got me thinking about an idea I had for a Fury video about one of the games that got me more into fighting games. That being Skullgirls. While I've never actually played Skullgirls or any of its updated versions myself, it's a game I really like to watch being played due to the creative cast of mostly female characters, and it looks like a lot of fun. Honestly, the only reason why I haven't played the game is because it just keeps slipping my mind. Skullgirls, alongside Arc System Works games, mainly BlazBlue, was actually my main inspiration for a fighting game idea of my own, but for the topic of this video that you can see in the title, there's something about the cast of Skullgirls that always piqued my interest. One of the main things about Skullgirls that separates it from other fighting games is its art style, where the title screen gives off a very Hollywood-like vibe to it, and the character select screen even uses a film reel down the center. But what fully runs the idea of this Fury home for me is the fact that during the opening cinematic, they have a roll call for all the playable characters, minus Double, in which they also show a movie poster featuring the respective character. This made me think of the possibility that maybe each of the playable characters in Skullgirls are based on, or at least are references to, different movie genres. And when trying to apply this idea, there are some characters who are obvious a match with genres, and others who are not. I even noticed some characters who are like a fusion of two genres, but eventually, after admittedly making some stretches, I think I have found at least one genre that each of the Skullgirls characters can be linked to. So, going in order that the characters are laid out on the Skullgirls wiki, from left to right, top to bottom, it's showtime! So of course the first character we come to is Filia, because she is treated as the main character of the game. The Ryu, if you will. Filia was actually one of the harder characters for me to tie to a movie genre, because she doesn't possess any obvious traits that link to one. But funnily enough, Filia is actually the first case of a character that I could see as a fusion of two genres. The first is action movies, and this is more reflected in Filia's fighting style than anything else, as Filia is the most direct character in regards to her moves. Most of her attacks involve her either using punches and kicks, or Samson for close-range strikes, similar to fight scenes present in a lot of action movies when the characters are just using their fists, unlike the rest of the cast who mostly possess supernatural abilities or rely on some sort of wacky equipment for a lot of their moves. The second, and this is more of a stretch, is chick flicks, as they mainly include a female protagonist, and, well, Filia is the main character of the game. Plus, Filia is the closest to a normal character in the whole game, because minus the fact that she has a parasite on her head, she is just your average high school girl, and even parts of her story mode reflect on her high school life. Moving on, next is Cerebella, who was another character that I had tried linking a movie genre to. Initially, I was thinking comedy, because she's a circus performer, but nothing about her character or story is really comedic, so it didn't work. But eventually, I was able to find one, and believe it or not, it's gangster movies. I know that sounds so far-fetched considering her more upbeat personality, but as well as being a circus performer, she also works for the Medici Mafia, where she serves as their leg breaker. Cerebella also possesses very close ties to the Medicis, as Vitale, one of their high-ranking members, is her adopted father, with her also considering the rest of the Mafia to be her family. Similar to how some portrayals of mafias in gangster movies also consider themselves to be a family. This is also enforced by how Cerebella's story is her doing Vitale and the rest of the Medici's dirty work for them, even killing Miss Fortune at the end, which is another similarity to gangster movie mafias where they have new or low-ranking members take care of a lot of their business so that if they are killed, it isn't a huge loss, and even straight up murdering anyone who is a potential threat to them, like Miss Fortune. Next up is Peacock, and as anyone who has played Skullgirls will guess, Peacock was the easiest character to connect to a genre, as it's practically rubbed in your face whenever she's on screen. Peacock is based on classic cartoons, and thus this is also the genre she fits into, or animated movies if you want to be a bit more broad. Her voice and dialogue are just like cartoon characters from that era, even including references to famous cartoon catchphrases, and her gang even take on the form of objects related to slapstick seen in old cartoons like a cartoony bomb, an anvil, and a weight. Lastly, some of her attacks even involve cartoon slapstick, such as heavy objects landing on people's heads. Next is Parasol, and she was another really easy character for me to find a matching genre, and that is obviously war movies. Parasol is both the Crown Princess and the leader of the Canopy Kingdom's elite military squad, the Black Egrets, who are quite clearly designed after Nazis with a little bit of World War I German soldiers thrown in there. Parasol's connection to war movies is also reflected in her moveset, with her using a pistol, miniature napalm bombs, and having a Black Egret soldier take a hit for her with a dramatic dive. And in her blockbuster moves, she has a Black Egret squad riding on motorbikes, a frickin' sniper shoot the opponent, and gunning down the opponent with Black Egret assistance. Continuing on, Miss Fortune is next, and I found her a little tricky to tie to a genre, but after a little thinking I found one. Film noir. Noir films primarily involve crime-related fiction, whether that be a detective story or a focus on a criminal gang. And I think Miss Fortune reflects both of these to an extent with her backstory. Miss Fortune was a member of a gang of thieves known as the Fishbone Gang, who were brutally murdered by the Medicis when attempting to steal the life gem from them. But Miss Fortune swallowed the gem, which put her in an undead state, and now she seeks to avenge the gang by taking down the Medicis. Miss Fortune being a member of a gang reflects the criminal-focused film noir movies, whilst her trying to take down the Medicis is more akin to the detective stories. At the end of her story, she even teams up with a detective named Irvin to save her friend Minette after she gets abducted alongside other Dagonians by the Medicis. Next is Painwheel, and she was another easy character for me to figure out. She is related to horror movies. I mean, her appearance already gives that away from how terrifying she looks, but her backstory also relates to it. Previously, she was just a normal schoolgirl named Carol, but was kidnapped and experimented on by Valentine and Brain Drain to become a Skullgirl killing machine, which resulted in her monstrous appearance. This is similar to various horror movie villains in a number of ways. For one, she is a young girl, one of the youngest characters in the game actually, which is reminiscent of horror movies that feature a ghost or monster resembling a young girl as the antagonist. Second is that not only was she turned into a killing machine, but she also becomes obsessed with killing, partially because of Brain Drain's control, and seeks revenge against Valentine and Brain Drain for what they did to her. Kind of like how a slasher villain loves to kill people, and in some cases stalks or seeks revenge against somebody or people in general for something horrible they went through, along with all of her weapons being bladed like slasher villains. And on the subject of Painwheel, Valentine is the next character. Valentine was also easy for me to figure out, as I believe that despite her cold personality and ninja fighting style, she is based on romance movies. I'm not just saying that because of her assets. Initially, I was thinking of hospital dramas, which stereotypically have a romance plot or subplot between the doctor and the nurse, and was also one of the origins of the sexy nurse trope which Valentine is based on. But what I think fully sells this idea is her name, Valentine. She doesn't just have that name for how hot she is, but her backstory is that she's the sole surviving member of the Last Hope, a group of nurses who all have code names after different holidays, meaning that the name Valentine is supposed to be a straight-up reference to Valentine's Day, the day of romance, or heartache, loneliness, and jealousy if you're me. And for the last of the initial lineup of characters, it's Double, and Double was the hardest character for me to find a matching genre. Even the one that I did eventually find isn't even its own separate genre. It's more of a sub-genre that is used in relation to other movie genres, and that is monster movies. Double is a shape-shifting creature with unknown origins who normally takes on the appearance of a nun to disguise herself. And since Double is the only character that isn't human or humanoid in her true form, it made me reminisce of typical movie monsters and aliens, mainly The Thing. The reason why Double doesn't appear during the roll call in the opening cinematic may be because her related genre is a subgenre rather than being a major genre like with the rest of the cast. But that is a stretch. And at the last minute, I also noticed that Double could be another character who is a fusion of two genres, as she could also be a slight nod to parody movies, in that she's a shapeshifter who takes on the forms and moves of the other characters, like how parodies copy the source material and make fun of it. So moving on to the characters that were added in Encore and Second Encore, we start off with Squiggly, who was actually an easy character for me to fit in, because her character already gives it away. Squiggly is another character who I see as a combination of two genres, as I see her as a reference to both zombie and opera movies. With zombie films, well, Squiggly is a zombie. She and her family were murdered by the Medicis, but her parasite Leviathan resurrected her in this zombie state. Additionally, one of her blockbuster moves has her bury the opponent alive and drop a coffin on them. And when she isn't in use, she hangs around underneath a gravestone before popping out of a coffin when switched to. As for the opera part, not only was Squiggly's family a group of opera singers, but one of her attacks has her and Leviathan singing, which draws the opponent in, and a blockbuster attack where she sings and creates a music note that deals damage. Both of which have her using Leviathan's tail as a makeshift microphone. Continuing with more easy-to-identify characters, we have Big Band, and to me, Big Band is also a fusion of two genres. This time being musicals and detective movies. Musicals is pretty obvious. All of his cybernetics are musical instruments, mostly jazz ones, along with all of his attacks and blockbuster moves involving the use of said instruments. Detective movies come from the fact that he is a detective himself. He was a police officer that was beaten and left for dead, which is what led to him receiving his cybernetics, where he acts as a lone, hard-boiled detective investigating to take down the Skullgirl. He's basically RoboCop if he took a band practice.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
Anyway, the next character is Fuqua, who honestly wasn't much trouble despite Filia being the complete opposite. Fuqua could be based on thriller movies, specifically psychological thrillers. This is because in her story mode, she is revealed to be an evil version of Filia that exists in her nightmares. The entire story is a dream that Filia has, in which Fuqua attempts to become her. Even her stage is a negative and distorted version of Filia's stage. Fuqua's existence in the story isn't even canon. She was originally intended to be an April Fool's joke, making fun of clone characters, but due to positive feedback, she became a permanent character. So in a way, she could be seen as a non-existent character who just lives inside the heads of the other characters to haunt them, which further adds to the psychological element of her character. Next up is Eliza, who was the hardest character for me to pin a genre to after Double, because her ancient Egyptian design motif doesn't really match with any genre. I had a vague idea of what to go for, but nothing concrete. Until I dug a bit deeper into Eliza's info, which made me pin her with historical drama movies. Now I know this sounds random, but I found out that Eliza was influenced and named after two significant women. The main one being Elizabeth Taylor, who played Cleopatra in the 1963 film with the same name. This is where she got her ancient Egyptian inspiration from, and what genre is Cleopatra classed as? Historical drama. The other woman that Eliza is based on is Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian serial killer who presumably murdered over 600 women so that she could bathe in their blood, believing that it would maintain her beauty. This is reflected in Eliza's moveset, which involves the use of constructs made out of blood. And since Bathory was a real-life person from the 1500s, it strengthens Eliza's connection to historical elements. For the only other male character in the roster, and one of my favorites actually, it's Beowulf, who I found easy to figure out. I see Beowulf as a reference to sports movies. More accurately, movies that focus on fighting-based sports like boxing and especially wrestling. Cause following the same trend as Squiggly and Big Band, Beowulf is a wrestler, and a lot of his moveset involves him using wrestling moves. His main weapon is even a chair, which has been used in more unorthodox methods of wrestling, where one of the wrestlers just grabs a chair from the audience and hits their opponent over the head with it. And to fully sell it home, a couple of Beowulf's animations are references to CM Punk, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair, all famous wrestlers. And for the final character, who was also one of the easiest characters to figure out, we have Robo Fortune, sci-fi. You all knew that's what I was going to say. She's a robot designed after Miss Fortune, complete with typical robotic weapons like laser beams, missiles, and other explosives. She was even created by Brain Drain, which gives off a vibe of a mad scientist creation, which is also prevalent in science fiction stories. And her story's ending involves giant robo-fortunes, which covers the giant robot archetype, attempting to wipe out humanity, which of course just screams sci-fi, especially Terminator. There's even no resistance involved. So that's it for all of these Skullgirls characters. Now, while it hasn't been confirmed that the cast are references to different movie genres, I think it would be really cool if that was the case. Not just because it would fit with the film-like aesthetics present in the intro, title screen, and character select, but I think it would make the theme of the game even cooler by having it be sort of a which movie genre will come out on top in this battle royale kind of thing. But like I just said, this hasn't been confirmed, and it's entirely possible that I'm just reading way too deep into things. So, as of right now, this is just a theory and not fact.